What if the world's most formidable fortress, heralded as impenetrable, the pride of modern engineering, collapsed utterly, not after months of brutal siege, but in a single day, without suffering the brunt of a major attack? Imagine a barrier so daunting that its architects, backed by the collective wisdom of the West, christened it Unbreakable. This was the steel arc, the apex of defensive architecture, a monument to military caution, and the ultimate test of whether walls and guns can still guard against the tides of modern war. Let's set the scene. Picture an expanse of rolling hills and tangled forests in Eastern Europe, sliced by a line of defense so deep and so lethal that every general in NATO called it the final word in fortress warfare. Over the course of more than 18 months, teams of engineers, guided by the sharpest Western military advisors, worked day and night, laying plans, pouring concrete, and stretching razor wire until their hands bled. Their task was to build a wall that would outlast any onslaught, to create a defensive system that would define the very shape of war for a generation. The result? The steel arc, a defensive complex unrivaled in scale, cunning, and firepower. It sprawled across the landscape in not one, but 3 staggered belts, each designed to function as an independent fortress. The first line, bristling with traps and death, was a minefield so dense that it bristled with more than 1,500 mines per square kilometer. To put that in perspective, imagine walking across a soccer field, knowing there are more than 150 mines hidden beneath every patch of grass. These were not just old-fashioned pressure mines, but modern seismic and magnetic explosives, capable of detecting and destroying even the most advanced vehicles. Beyond the minefields, the second belt rose, a line marked by concrete bunkers, camouflaged artillery positions, and row after row of dragon's teeth. Massive concrete obstacles designed to rip the treads from tanks and force infantry into the jaws of pre-sighted machine guns. Every feature of the land, every rise, every curve, every patch of woods, had been measured and mapped so that artillery could strike within seconds. In some sectors, more than 40 heavy guns stood ready on each kilometer of front, a density unseen since the great battles of the Second World War. Beneath the surface, a labyrinth of tunnels snaked between strongpoints, allowing defenders to shift men and supplies unseen, to pop up where least expected, and to turn every setback into a new ambush. The third line, a deep reserve belt, was the beating heart, a network of supply depots, command posts, and reserves, all shielded by yet more concrete and steel. In total, the steel arc cut a swathe nearly 30 kilometers deep, so vast that even if attackers breached the first line, they would still face 2 more belts of hellish resistance. Military analysts pointed to the numbers and shook their heads in awe. Some claimed that any army daring to attack would face losses at a ratio as high as 7-1. Others predicted that even the mightiest offensive would bog down, bleeding itself white in the mud and fire, unable to break through after 3 months or more. The world's war colleges studied the steel arc as a case study in deterrence, a wall so daunting it would force adversaries to think twice, to hesitate, perhaps to give up altogether. If this sounds familiar, it should. Throughout history, civilizations have poured their hopes and their fortunes into fortifications. Think of Hadrian's Wall, a Roman attempt to keep out the barbarians of the north, stretching for more than 100 kilometers across Britain, or the Maginot Line, France's interwar marvel, designed to block any German advance with its underground bunkers and artillery turrets, or the Siegfried Line, the Great Wall of China, and the countless castles and citadels that dot the Old World. In each case, the wall was supposed to be the answer, the ultimate insurance policy. But history is littered with the ruins of unbreakable defenses. Hadrian's Wall was outflanked, the Maginot Line was bypassed by tanks through the Ardennes, and the Siegfried Line fell to combined arms tactics unimagined when it was built. Each time, attackers found a way not just over or through the wall, but around it, using new ideas, new tools, and new doctrines. So what happened to the steel arc? How did this latest, greatest fortress collapse almost overnight, leaving stunned generals and a world full of anxious strategists. What does this tell us about the real meaning of security in the 21st century? To understand, we must look beyond the visible, beyond the concrete, the steel, and the gun emplacements. The true breach began long before the first artillery shell ever landed. The defeat of the Steel Ark was not a matter of brute force, but a revolution in warfare, a clash between entrenched doctrine and a new information-driven paradigm. The defenders believed in their wall. They trusted in the density of their mines, the thickness of their bunkers, and the precision of their artillery. Their doctrine was clear: grind down the attacker, force him into the teeth of pre-planned kill zones, and bleed him until he gave up. It was a faith rooted in centuries of positional warfare, from Verdun to Kursk, from the trenches of World War I to the defensive belts around Moscow in World War II. Yet, as so often in history, confidence became a trap. Treating doctrine as gospel, the planners of the Steel Ark assumed their adversary would play by their rules, slugging it out, yard by bloody yard, in a contest of attrition. They built their defense not just as a physical barrier, but as a psychological snare, one that dared the enemy to try and promised annihilation if he did. But their adversary, the Russian command, had learned the lessons of history. They recognized that attacking directly into the teeth of the Steel Ark would be madness. Instead, their real campaign began in silence and in shadow, months before the firing started. The first blow against the Steel Ark was struck in cyberspace and in the invisible ether of radio waves. Russian planners set out not to break the wall with tanks and shells, but to unravel it from within by mastering the flow of information. Imagine a digital twin of the battlefield, a living, breathing model, constantly updated with data from satellites, drones, intercepted radio signals, and human sources. High-resolution satellites swept the sky, capturing every change in the landscape, every new bunker, every movement of supplies. Electronic eavesdropping became routine. Every call, every encrypted burst, every scrap of data was intercepted, decoded, and analyzed. Human agents on the ground, some local sympathizers, others elite infiltrators, mapped daily routines, shift changes, and even the taste in coffee at command posts. Nothing was too small to matter. All this information streamed into operations centers, where advanced algorithms and neural networks sifted, sorted, and fused it into a real-time map. The Steel Ark, once a mystery to outsiders, was now transparent, its secrets tagged, its weaknesses exposed. This approach, known as multi-domain intelligence fusion, is not new in theory. But never before had it been executed on such a scale, or with such relentless thoroughness. In the Gulf War, American planners famously used satellite imagery to spot Iraqi forces hiding in the desert. In the opening hours of Operation Desert Storm, precision airstrikes crippled command and control, leaving Iraqi units isolated and confused. But the Steel Ark operation took this concept to new heights, integrating signals intelligence, human intelligence, cyber operations, and drone surveillance into a seamless, adaptive system. When the kinetic phase began, it was not with a thunderous days-long barrage like the Somme or Stalingrad. Instead, fire arrived as a scalpel, swift, precise, and devastating. Within minutes, targeted strikes silenced command posts, destroyed artillery batteries, and severed critical communications. Ammunition depots and fuel storage sites erupted in flames. The defenders, cut off from their leaders and their supplies, found themselves blind and isolated. Consider the psychological shock. Defenders who had drilled for months on the expectation of a slow, grinding attack suddenly found their lines collapsing without warning. Their radios jammed, their orders delayed, their rear areas under attack before the front lines even saw the enemy. In the chaos, some units tried to counterattack, only to be met with instant pinpoint artillery fire, called in by forward teams using real-time drone feeds. This was not the first time electronic warfare had played a decisive role. During the Yom Kippur War in 1973, Israeli forces suffered heavy losses when Egyptian and Syrian units used sophisticated Soviet-built jammers and surface-to-air missiles to disrupt Israeli air support. But the scale and sophistication of the steel arc breach far surpassed anything seen before. Every move, every signal, every weakness was mapped and exploited almost instantly. Meanwhile, small, agile strike teams, no more than 8 to 12 soldiers each, slipped through gaps mapped in minute detail. Each team included a drone pilot, an electronic warfare specialist, and a real-time communications operator. Their orders were not to assault the strongest points, but to bypass them, infiltrating deep into the rear and targeting the sinews of the defense. Command bunkers, supply depots, relay stations, and communications hubs. They moved as a living network, coordinated by instantaneous data links, constantly updated by streams of intelligence from above. First-person view drones, piloted with uncanny finesse, swept through trenches and bunkers, clearing defenders without risking a single attacker's life. From above, quadcopters and fixed-wing drones spotted machine gun nests, sniper positions, and ambush sites invisible to the naked eye. The entire assault unfolded as a single adaptive organism, each team's actions coordinated in real time, every opportunity seized, every threat neutralized before it could grow. The defenders, trained for set-piece battles and heroic last stands, found themselves encircled, attacked from flanks and rear, their carefully prepared kill zones rendered irrelevant by foes who never arrived where expected. Minefields and dragon's teeth that had taken months to build were simply avoided. Every attempt at a counterattack brought an immediate, precise barrage of artillery, called in by forward teams with second-by-second targeting updates. In military history, the collapse of a fortress has often signaled the end of an era. The fall of Constantinople in 1453, despite its massive walls and centuries of preparation, marked the end of Byzantium and the dawn of gunpowder warfare. The Maginot Line's irrelevance in 1940, the crumbling of the Siegfried Line in 1945, all were milestones in the evolution of strategy. The Steel Arc's collapse, too, is such a moment, a live broadcast of a new era in war. The shockwaves were felt far beyond the battlefield. Military leaders and policymakers worldwide watched in disbelief as the unbreakable fortress fell in less than a day. War colleges scrambled to rewrite their textbooks. Defense ministries questioned the billions spent on static defenses. The old certainties were gone. So what are the lessons? What does the fall of the Steel Arc teach us about the future of conflict? First, and most decisively, information is now the true fortress. The side that sees, understands, and decides first controls the fight. This is not just theory. It is proven fact, played out in every recent conflict from Ukraine to Nagorno-Karabakh. In the 21st century, speed of information trumps massed force. Outcomes are shaped in moments, not months. When data travels faster than bullets, the advantage tilts decisively. Second, agility shatters tradition. No plan, however brilliant, survives contact with a networked, adaptive enemy. Forces that can morph tactics on the fly, strike from unexpected vectors, and refuse to be predictable can break even the strongest lines. History is full of examples. Hannibal crossing the Alps to outflank Rome's legions, the German blitzkrieg sweeping around the Maginot Line, or American Marines using island hopping in the Pacific to bypass heavily fortified Japanese garrisons. In each case, agility, not brute force, broke the stalemate. Third, drones and precision strikes are no longer the preserve of elite forces. Swarms of sensors and pinpoint weapons erase old boundaries. Front and rear, fortress and field, all dissolve under a digital haze of targeting and surveillance. In the recent conflict in the South Caucasus, Azerbaijani forces used Turkish-made Bayraktar drones to devastate Armenian armor and artillery, shifting the balance of power almost overnight. In Ukraine, both sides have fielded thousands of drones, from cheap quadcopters to long-range loitering munitions, making the battlefield transparent and deadly. Fourth, the role of the soldier is transformed. Each operator is now a node in a living web, connected not just to his squad, but to networks of sensors, automated aids, and distant fires. Mastery of information flows counts as much as marksmanship. The warrior of today is part analyst, part fighter, part conductor of unseen orchestras. Training now includes not just weapons and tactics, but coding, drone piloting, and electronic warfare. Fifth, victory demands harmony across every domain. Ground, air, cyber, and psychological lines must blend into a seamless assault. True collapse comes not from smashing walls, but from unraveling the enemy's system, causing confusion, paralysis, and doubt. Disruption, not destruction, is now the path to conquest. The most decisive victories are those where the enemy gives up, not because he is destroyed, but because he can no longer function as a coherent force. Consider some practical steps that modern militaries, and indeed any organization, can take to adapt to this new reality. First, invest in information fusion. Build operations centers capable of integrating data from every source: satellites, drones, electronic intercepts, social media, and human agents. Train analysts to spot patterns, not just process reports. Use artificial intelligence to sift the torrent of data and highlight emerging threats and opportunities. Second, embrace decentralized command. Empower small teams to make decisions on the fly, based on real-time intelligence. Equip them with secure communications, portable drones, and electronic warfare kits. Encourage improvisation and initiative at every level. The age of rigid hierarchies is over. Third, harden against digital attack. Every network is a potential target. Practice cyber hygiene relentlessly. Train units to fight through jamming, hacking, and deception. Red teaming, simulating enemy attacks on your own systems, should be routine, not exceptional. Fourth, rethink fortification. Physical barriers still have value, but only when paired with active adaptive defense. Static lines must be laced with sensors, covered by mobile reserves, and constantly updated based on fresh intelligence. The best defense is now a shifting mosaic, not a static wall. Fifth, cultivate adaptability as a core value. War is now a contest of brains as much as brawn. Encourage curiosity, reward creative thinking, and train leaders to expect the unexpected. The armies that thrive will be those that learn fastest, not those that dig deepest. The collapse of the Steel Arc is not just a military lesson, it is a warning to every institution that clings to the old ways while the world evolves around them. In business, in security, in governance, the rules are the same. Information moves faster, disruption is constant, and the cost of rigidity is irrelevance. The reign of steel and concrete is finished. Information is now the true stronghold, the decisive weapon that shapes every outcome, from the battlefield to the boardroom. Investing in thick walls while neglecting the flow of data and the agility of your teams is not just wasteful, it risks disaster. The future belongs to those who are networked, intelligent, and endlessly flexible. To drive the lesson home, let's imagine a scenario. Picture a country that, watching the fall of the Steel Arc, chooses to double down on traditional defenses, building thicker walls, laying more mines, buying bigger guns. Meanwhile, its adversary invests in artificial intelligence, drone swarms, and decentralized command. When conflict comes, the result is a replay. The walls are mapped and bypassed, leadership is paralyzed, and collapse comes not after months, but in days. The cost is not just defeat, but the loss of credibility, security, and future options. But what if instead, leaders take the lesson to heart? They train a new generation of officers to fuse information, improvise under pressure, and harness technology. They build alliances across domains, linking cyber, air, ground, and psychological operations into a single, adaptive force. They invest in the tools and mindsets needed for perpetual learning. In this scenario, the next Steel Arc is not a wall of concrete, but a living network, one that grows stronger with every challenge. In closing, the fall of the Steel Arc is more than a story of military failure. It is a parable of our age, a reminder that every fortress, no matter how strong, can be undone by the invisible hand of innovation. The question is not whether to build walls or not, but whether we are willing to adapt, to learn, and to master the new frontiers of information. The future is here. Everywhere is now the front line. And in this world, the only unbreakable defense is the speed with which you can outthink, outmaneuver, and outlearn your adversary. For leaders, strategists, and citizens alike, the lesson is clear. Higher walls will not save you, only smarter networks can. The age of the steel arc is over. The age of information has begun.